The rain wasn't heavy, just a steady gray drizzle that clung to everything in downtown Los Angeles like a damp sigh. It was the kind of afternoon that made people hurry, heads down, collars up, eyes fixed on the nearest doorway or bus stop. Few paused. Fewer still noticed the old man pushing a shopping cart along the sidewalk. He moved slowly, each step deliberate, as if his bones remembered every year they'd carried him. The cart wasn't full of groceries or laundry. It was packed with plastic bottles, crushed soda cans, and a few cardboard boxes tied together with twine. A faded blue jacket hung from his thin shoulders, too big and worn at the elbows. His hands, knotted with age and weathered like old rope, gripped the rusted handle with quiet resolve. Near a side alley behind a shuttered cafe, he stopped to lift a heavy recycling bin onto the sidewalk. His breath came in short puffs, visible in the cool air. He tried once, twice. On the third try, his knee buckled slightly and he steadied himself against the cart, eyes closed for just a second. That's when someone stepped forward. No fanfare, no camera crew, just a man in a dark hoodie and jeans, carrying a paper bag from a nearby bookstore. He didn't say anything at first, just lifted the bin with ease and set it beside the cart. Then he bent down and began sorting through the bin's contents, pulling out bottles and placing them gently into the cart. "Thank you," the older man said, voice rough but warm. "No problem," came the reply. Simple, sincere. They worked side by side for a few minutes, pulling out recyclables in silence. Raindrops dotted their shoulders. The younger man didn't seem in a rush. He didn't glance at his phone or check his watch. He just helped. When the bin was empty, the older man straightened slowly, rubbing his lower back. "You don't see many folks stop these days," he said, almost to himself. "I saw you struggling," the other replied. "Figured I could lend a hand." A small smile flickered across the older man's face. "Most folks look right through me, like I'm part of the sidewalk." "They're missing out," the younger man said, meeting his eyes. There was something in that look, not pity, not curiosity, just plain human recognition. It made the older man stand a little taller. They talked for a few more minutes, not about grand things, just the weather, the price of bread, how the bus routes had changed. The younger man listened more than he spoke. When the older man mentioned he collected cans to help pay for groceries, "Pension doesn't stretch like it used to," the other nodded, not with shock but with understanding. Before leaving, the younger man reached into his bag and pulled out a thick dark green coat. "It's dry inside," he said, "and it's colder than it looks." "Take it," the older man hesitated. Pride flickered in his eyes. But the coat looked warm, and his own jacket had seen better decades. "I can't, please," the other said gently. "I've got another." After a pause, the older man accepted it. The coat was soft, lined, and smelled faintly of cedar. He slipped it on. It fit surprisingly well. "Thank you," he said again, this time with more weight behind the words. The younger man gave a small nod, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the misty street without looking back. But he didn't forget. Back in his quiet apartment later that evening, the younger man sat by the window, a cup of tea cooling in his hands. Rain tapped softly against the glass. His thoughts kept circling back to the man with the cart, the way his hands shook slightly when he reached for a bottle, the careful way he avoided eye contact with passers-by, as if trying not to take up space in a world that had long stopped making room for him. He thought about the coat. It was just a coat. But it wasn't. It was warmth. It was dignity. It was someone saying, "I see you." He'd met countless people in his life, fans, colleagues, strangers at airports, but few had stayed with him like this quiet encounter. There was no drama, no plea for help. Just a man doing what he had to do to get through the day. And something about that stubborn, quiet endurance struck deep. He Googled local senior assistance programs that night, scrolled through pages of eligibility requirements, waiting lists, and underfunded shelters. He read about rising rent costs, fixed incomes that hadn't budged in years, and how many older adults were choosing between medicine and meals. The numbers were staggering, but it was the faces behind them that haunted him. He didn't sleep much. The next morning, he returned to the same neighborhood, hoodie up, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the sidewalks. He didn't know if he'd see the man again. Downtown was big and routines changed. But around mid-morning near the same alley, there he was, cart rattling softly over cracked pavement, sorting through a dumpster with careful hands. The younger man didn't rush over this time. He hung back watching, not out of suspicion but respect. He wanted to understand, not intrude. After a while, he approached slowly. "Morning." The older man looked up surprised, then recognized him. "Well, I'll be. You came back. Said I'd check on you." The younger man replied, though he hadn't actually said that. But it felt true. They walked together for a bit, just a few blocks, as the older man explained his route. Start at 4 a.m., hit the alleys behind restaurants before the trash trucks come, then head to the recycling center by noon. On good days, he made enough for a loaf of bread, some beans, maybe a banana. On bad days, he skipped dinner. "You ever think about asking for help?" the younger man asked carefully. "Help's for people who can't manage," the older man said, not bitterly, just matter-of-factly. "I can manage." "But you shouldn't have to," came the quiet reply. The older man glanced at him, then looked away. Life doesn't always give you a choice. They reached the recycling center, a small, cluttered lot with a scale and a tired-looking clerk. The younger man waited while the older man weighed his haul. $3.75. He counted the coins slowly, then tucked them into a small tin in his pocket. As they stepped back onto the street, the younger man asked, "Can I buy you lunch?" The older man hesitated, then nodded. "Only if it's somewhere with a bench. My feet are talking to me." They found a small diner a few blocks away. Over bowls of soup and thick slices of rye toast, the conversation deepened. The older man spoke of his wife, gone 10 years now, of working in a machine shop for 42 years, of watching his neighborhood change until he barely recognized it. He didn't complain. He just shared like passing a story hand to hand. The younger man listened. Really listened. Not to fix, not to impress, just to be there. By the time they left the diner, the sun had broken through the clouds. The older man stood a little straighter. "You're a good listener," he said. "Just a person," the younger man replied. But as he walked away that afternoon, he knew he couldn't unsee what he'd seen. And he wouldn't. That night, he made a call, not to a publicist, not to a news outlet, but to someone he trusted, a friend who ran a small nonprofit helping seniors in need. "I met someone," he said, "and I think I can help. But I want to do it right, no cameras, no headlines. Just one human being reaching out to another." And that was how it began. Not with a grand gesture, but with a coat, a bowl of soup, and the simple, powerful act of paying attention. He next morning came with sharp sunlight and a breeze that carried the smell of street food and exhaust. He was back before 9, standing near the corner where they'd parted the day before. He didn't expect to find the older man right away. Routine was everything at that age, but life had a way of throwing curveballs. Still, he waited. Not out of obligation, but because something inside him had shifted. By 10, there he was. Same cart, same slow, steady pace, but today he wore the green coat. It looked better on him than it ever had on its previous owner. The younger man fell into step beside him without a word. The older man glanced over, surprised but not startled. "You again," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Figured I'd tag along," the younger man replied, "if that's all right, long as you don't slow me down." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, past shuttered storefronts and open bodegas, past delivery trucks double-parked and honking. The older man knew every alley, every dumpster that tended to yield glass bottles or uncrushed cans. He moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd turned survival into a rhythm. Over the next few days, the younger man showed up again and again. Never announced, never pushed. Just appeared, offered a hand, asked a question, listened to the answer. He learned that the man woke before dawn because the alleys were quieter then, less chance of being shooed away or mistaken for someone dangerous. He learned that some restaurant owners saved bottles for him. Others yelled if they caught him near their trash. He learned that Tuesday was the best day for recyclables. People cleaned out their fridges after the weekend. He also learned what wasn't said. The way the older man winced when he bent too far. How he sometimes paused on a bench, eyes closed, just breathing. How he never asked for anything. Not a ride, not money, not even a second cup of coffee. One afternoon, as they sat on a low wall outside a laundromat sharing a bag of peanuts, the younger man finally asked, "Why don't you look into housing? Assistance or food programs?" The older man chewed slowly, then sighed. "Tried years back, got put on a list, still waiting. He tapped his temple. And they ask for papers I don't got anymore, or need someone to vouch for me. I don't got folks for that. What about family? A pause. Gone, or far, or both. The younger man didn't push. He just nodded. But that night he dug deeper. He called contacts, quiet ones, trusted ones, who worked with seniors in the city. He learned that wait lists for subsidized housing could stretch 5 years or more. That many older adults didn't qualify for aid because they owned a car they couldn't afford to fix, or had a tiny savings account that pushed them over the income limit. That pride often kept people from applying at all. He also learned something else. The man had once worked in a factory that made airplane parts. 38 years. Never missed a day until his wife got sick. After she passed, he stayed in their apartment until the rent doubled. Then he moved to a smaller room, then a shared unit. Then, when the roommate died and the landlord raised the price again, he ended up on the street, not sleeping rough but couch surfing with distant cousins until there were no more couches. Now he slept in a 24-hour laundromat some nights, or in the back booth of a diner that didn't mind as long as he bought coffee. Other nights he just walked. The younger man sat at his kitchen table, staring at notes scribbled on a legal pad, numbers, names of agencies, phone numbers with long hold times. It felt overwhelming. But then he thought of the coat, of the way the older man had stood a little taller wearing it. If one small thing could do that, what could a real solution do? He made a decision. Not loud, not flashy, but firm. He wouldn't just give money. He'd build something that lasted. He reached out to a nonprofit he'd quietly supported for years. They specialized in helping isolated seniors find stable housing and community support. He explained the situation, no names, just the facts. I want to cover rent, utilities, groceries for at least 2 years, he said. But it has to be anonymous and it has to feel like help, not charity. The director understood. We can find a place, she said. Somewhere safe, near a bus line, with a fridge and a stove. Maybe even a little porch. Good, he said. Now how do I get him to accept it without making him feel like a project? That was the real challenge. Over the next week, their walks became longer. They'd stop at parks, sit on benches. The younger man started bringing a thermos of soup or a sandwich. Not every time, just enough to feel natural. He asked about the man's favorite music, his first job, the best meal he'd ever eaten. Stories began to flow, funny ones, sad ones, proud ones. The kind of stories that stitch a life together. One rainy Thursday, as they sheltered under an awning, the younger man said, "What if you didn't have to push that cart anymore?" The older man looked at him wary. Everyone's got to do something. What if you could do something that didn't hurt your back? Something that gave you peace instead of pain? The older man was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Peace costs money." "Not always," the younger man replied. "Sometimes it just costs someone caring enough to make space for it." A few days later, he gently mentioned a community garden nearby that needed volunteers. Light work, mostly watering plants and sorting seeds. "They pay a small stipend," he added, "and they serve lunch." The older man raised an eyebrow. "You got something to do with this?" "Maybe," the younger man admitted, "but the offer's real, and the people are kind." After a long pause, the older man nodded. "All right, I'll take a look." It wasn't acceptance yet, but it was a crack in the door. The younger man didn't rush. He knew trust wasn't built in a day, especially when life had taught you to expect the worst. So he kept showing up, kept listening, kept treating the man not as a problem to solve, but as a person to walk beside. Then came the morning when the older man didn't show up at their usual spot. Panic flickered in the younger man's chest. He checked the alleys, the recycling center, even the laundromat. Nothing. By afternoon, he was about to call shelters, when he saw the cart parked neatly outside a bus stop covered with a tarp. And there he was, sitting on a bench, wrapped in the green coat, looking tired but calm. "You missed me?" the older man asked with a faint smile. "I was worried. Had a rough night. My hip's been acting up." He rubbed his side. Thought I'd rest before heading out. The younger man sat beside him. What if you didn't have to head out today or tomorrow? The older man looked at him, really looked. What are you saying? I found a place. Small. Quiet. Near a clinic and a grocery store. You'd have your own kitchen. A bed that doesn't fold up. And that garden I mentioned? It's just 2 blocks away. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of traffic. You'd be paying for it, the older man said finally. I'd be making sure you don't have to choose between eating and keeping a roof over your head. The younger man corrected gently. There's a difference. Tears welled in the older man's eyes, but he blinked them back. I've taken care of myself my whole life. And you still will, the younger man said. Just not alone anymore. The older man stared at his hands. Wrinkled, scarred, strong. Then he nodded, just once. All right, he whispered. Show me. That afternoon they walked, not to an alley, but to a modest apartment building with flower boxes in the windows. The manager, briefed in advance, greeted them warmly but without fuss. The unit was clean, simple, with sunlight streaming through the curtains. The older man stepped inside slowly, running a hand along the kitchen counter. He opened the fridge, empty but cold. He sat on the edge of the bed. It didn't squeak. Outside, the younger man waited on the sidewalk, heart pounding. He didn't want to intrude on this moment. After a few minutes, the older man appeared in the doorway. It's real, he said, voice thick. It is, the younger man replied. The older man looked at him, not with gratitude that felt heavy, but with something quieter, deeper. Recognition. Why? He asked. Why me? The younger man smiled softly. Because you're here, and you matter. No cameras rolled, no crowd gathered, just 2 people on a quiet street, one offering help, the other finally allowing himself to receive it. And in that moment, something unimaginable began, not with a headline, but with a key, a warm room, and the first real breath of relief in a very long time. Started with a bag of oranges. One Tuesday morning, the older man opened his apartment door to find a paper sack sitting on the mat. Inside were 6 plump oranges, a loaf of sourdough, and a note that read, "From the corner market, enjoy." No signature. Just kindness wrapped in brown paper. He smiled. He knew who it was from. The grocer 2 blocks down, a man with a thick mustache and a habit of humming old jazz tunes while stocking shelves. They'd exchanged nods for months, but never words. Now that small gesture opened a door. The next week, the laundromat owner dropped off a stack of clean towels, just in case. A neighbor from downstairs brought over a potted geranium. Because your window looked lonely. The librarian began saving. Large print books he might like. None of them knew the full story, just that a quiet man had moved in and he seemed to carry a lifetime in his eyes. Meanwhile, the younger man kept visiting, but less often now. Not because he cared less, but because the older man didn't need him the same way anymore. Their walks had shifted from alleys to the community garden, where the older man now spent his mornings tending tomato plants and chatting with volunteers half his age. He'd been given a small stipend for his work, not enough to live on, but enough to buy coffee and feel useful. And that, he'd said once, mattered more than money. The younger man watched from a distance as the older man's shoulders relaxed, as his laugh, once rare, began to surface more often. He saw how the man started writing letters again, using the desk by the window. At first they were to distant cousins, then to local officials, then to newspapers. Gentle, thoughtful letters about how hard it was for older folks to find affordable housing. How dignity wasn't a luxury but a necessity. One afternoon, while sharing iced tea on the small balcony, the younger man asked, "Ever think about speaking up more? Maybe at a city meeting?" The older man stirred his tea slowly. "I used to think no one would listen to an old man pushing a cart, but now, maybe they'd hear the words if the coat's clean and the voice is steady." That was all the younger man needed to hear. Quietly, he reached out to a local advocacy group that supported senior voices in policy discussions. He didn't fund them outright. He simply connected them with the older man and asked them to listen. Within weeks, the older man was invited to share his story at a town hall on elder housing. He spoke for 10 minutes. No theatrics. Just truth. I worked my whole life. I paid my taxes. I never asked for much. But when I got old, the world forgot I was still here. The room fell silent. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone did. News of his talk spread, not through viral videos, but through word of mouth, church bulletins, neighborhood newsletters. People began showing up at city council meetings asking, "What are we doing for our elders?" Donations to local senior food programs ticked upward. A few landlords even offered units at reduced rates for seniors in need. The younger man watched it all unfold with quiet pride. He never took credit. In fact, he made sure not to be seen at the events. This wasn't his story, it was the older man's, and it was the community's. Still, his own actions hadn't stopped. Using a trusted advisor, he set up a modest fund through a local charity. No fanfare, no press release. He called it the Dignity Fund. Its purpose was simple: help seniors cover rent gaps, buy groceries, or pay for transportation when they fell through the cracks of larger systems. It wasn't meant to solve everything, just to be a bridge when someone was one step from falling. He funded it quietly, consistently, and insisted that every recipient remain anonymous unless they chose otherwise. "This isn't about me giving," he told the charity director. "It's about people being able to hold their heads high." Months passed. Seasons turned. One evening, during a low-key interview for a small arts magazine, no bright lights, just 2 chairs and a recorder, the interviewer asked, "You've always been private about your life, but people wonder, what drives your kindness?" He thought for a moment, stirring his coffee. "I don't think of it as kindness," he said. "I think of it as paying attention. Most people aren't asking for miracles. They're just hoping someone sees them. And if you see someone, really see them, you can't just walk away." The quote didn't make headlines, but it found its way onto social media, shared by nurses, teachers, bus drivers, ordinary people who'd also stopped to help someone on a hard day. Comments poured in. "This reminded me to check on my neighbor. I bought groceries for the man who bags my cans. Today, I listened instead of rushing." It wasn't a movement. It was a ripple. Back in the apartment, the older man had started something of his own. He'd noticed a younger man, early 30s, hollow-eyed, sleeping in the bus shelter near the garden. One day he brought him a sandwich, then a blanket, then an invitation to help in the garden for a few hours in exchange for a meal and a warm place to sit. He didn't offer solutions. Just space. Just time. When the younger man visited one Saturday, he found the two of them repotting herbs, laughing over a story about bad haircuts in the 1970s. He didn't interrupt. He just leaned against the fence and watched. Later, over tea, the older man said, "I told him about the fund. Not your name, just that there's help if he's ready," he cried. Said no one had asked if he was okay in years. The younger man nodded. "You're giving him what you needed." "Maybe," the older man said. "Or maybe I'm just passing on what you gave me." They sat in silence for a while, listening to birds in the trees and the distant hum of the city. That night, the younger man received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, on-lined notebook paper. It read, "You gave me back my tomorrow. Not just a roof or a meal, but the chance to matter again. I used to think my story ended in that cart, but you helped me turn the page. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible." He read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer with other notes he'd saved over the years. Reminders that connection was the real currency of life. Weeks later, a small documentary team approached the charity about filming a short piece on unsung heroes in the city. They wanted to highlight everyday people making a difference, like the older man in his garden, the grocer with the oranges, the librarian saving books. The younger man agreed, but only if his role remained off camera. "Blur my face," he said. "Or don't show me at all. This isn't about me." The final film was quiet, honest, and deeply human. It showed wrinkled hands planting seeds, neighbors sharing meals, city officials listening to elders. It didn't name celebrities. It named compassion. And in one brief shot, just 3 seconds, the camera panned past a man in a hoodie walking down a familiar street. He paused when he saw someone struggling with a heavy bag. Without hesitation, he stepped forward to help. No one watching knew who he was, and that was exactly how he wanted it, because the unimaginable wasn't fame or fortune. It was choosing, again and again, to care when no one's watching, and trusting that the ripples would find their way home. A year had passed since the green coat first found its way onto tired shoulders. The seasons had cycled through, spring rains, summer heat, fall's golden hush, and a winter that never quite bit hard enough to freeze the city's pulse. And through it all, life had settled into something softer, steadier, for the man who once pushed a cart through alleys just to eat. He still rose early, but now it was to water the geraniums on his small balcony or read the paper with a cup of strong tea. His days were filled with purpose, not survival. At the community garden, he wasn't just a volunteer. He'd become something of a mentor. Young people came to him not just for tips on growing tomatoes, but for advice on patience, on weathering hard times, on how to keep your dignity when the world tries to strip it away. He'd even started a weekly coffee circle for seniors in the building, just a folding table in the courtyard, a thermos, and open ears. Sometimes they talked about grandkids, sometimes about loss. Sometimes they just sat in silence, comfortable in each other's presence. No one had to explain why they were there. They just knew. The younger man still visited, though less often now. Their bond had shifted from rescuer and rescued to something quieter and deeper, friendship. They'd meet for walks, not to fix anything, but simply to share the rhythm of the day. Sometimes they'd stop at the same diner where they'd shared their first meal. The waitress always saved them the corner booth. One afternoon, as they sat watching pigeons strut across the sidewalk, the older man said, "You know, I used to think kindness was something you gave when you had extra, but you showed me it's something you give even when you're tired, even when no one's watching." The younger man smiled. "I didn't show you anything. You already knew it. You just needed someone to remind you." They both knew the truth. Help wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up, again and again. By now, the small Dignity Fund had quietly assisted over 24 seniors, covering a month's rent here, a medical copay there, a bus pass for someone trying to get to a job interview. None of it made headlines. None of it needed to. The real impact was in the quiet relief of a phone call that didn't end in eviction, or a grocery bag that didn't leave someone choosing between bread and medicine. The older man had become an unofficial ambassador for the cause, not through speeches but through presence. He'd sit with new faces at the senior center, listen to their stories, and gently mention, "There's help if you need it." No strings, he never pushed, just offered. And because he'd been there himself, people believed him. One spring morning, he received a call from the local housing authority. They were launching a pilot program for emergency senior housing, and they wanted his input. "Your letters made a difference," the coordinator said. "You gave us a face to go with the numbers." He went to the meetings, sat at the table, spoke when asked, listened more than he talked. And slowly, policies began to shift, small changes but real ones. Faster processing for applications, waivers for documentation lost to time or fire, a hotline staffed by people who actually answered. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Meanwhile, the younger man continued his own quiet work. He never posted about it, never hinted at it in interviews. When asked about charity, he'd say things like, "We all have more than we think," or, "The best help is the kind that lets someone keep their pride." He knew the danger of turning real human connection into content, so he kept it human. Always. Then came the documentary. It was small, just 20 minutes long, shown at a local film festival, and later posted online by a nonprofit focused on community care. It didn't feature celebrities. It featured hands, wrinkled hands planting seeds, hands passing groceries, hands holding other hands. The older man appeared in several scenes, laughing in the garden, writing a letter, sharing soup with a neighbor. The younger man was only seen once from behind, walking away after helping someone carry groceries. The film ended with a simple line on a black screen. "Change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and you have to lean in to hear it." People shared it, not because it was flashy, but because it felt true. Teachers showed it in class. Churches screened it after service. Social workers used it in training. It sparked conversations, not about one man's generosity, but about how everyone could be part of the solution. One evening, the younger man walked past the old alley where it all began. The dumpster was still there, the pavement still cracked. But this time he saw a different figure, A woman in her 70s, sorting bottles with careful hands. She looked tired but not broken. He didn't hesitate. He walked over, picked up a bin, and started helping. She looked up, startled. "Long day?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Always is." He didn't offer money. Didn't make promises. Just worked beside her for a few minutes, then said, "There's a place 2 blocks over that buys these at a better rate. And they've got coffee inside." She studied him, then gave a small nod. "Thank you." He walked away, not looking back. But he knew he'd be back tomorrow. Not to fix her life, but to see her. To remind her she wasn't invisible. That night he sat on his own balcony, the city lights flickering below. His phone buzzed, a message from the older man. "Garden's blooming. Come see the sunflowers," he smiled. Typed back, "Be there Saturday, no fanfare." No applause. Just 2 people connected by a moment that grew into something lasting. The truth was, the unimaginable hadn't been a single act. It had been a choice, repeated daily, to believe that one person matters. That dignity isn't earned, it's owed. That help doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. And in a world that often celebrates noise, that quiet belief was the most radical thing of all. Years from now, no one would remember the exact date or the headlines that never were, but someone would remember the coat, the soup, the letter, the hand that reached out when no one else did. And that would be enough, because real change doesn't live in spotlights. It lives in sidewalks, in shared silence, in the space between "I see you" and "you're not alone." And sometimes that's everything.